What if Count Dooku had killed Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis? The air crackled with energy as Count Dooku stood in the dimly lit hangar of the Geonosian catacombs. His curved hilt ignited with a snap hiss, bathing the cavernous space in a crimson glow of his blade. Across from him, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi prepared themselves, their exhaustion evident from the trials of the past hours. The Clone Wars had begun, but for these Jedi, it would end here. Obi-Wan took a defensive stance, his blue saber humming steadily, while Anakin, ever brash, charged forward with reckless fury. The Sith Lord met him with calculated precision, his Makashi form flowing like liquid. Every strike Anakin delivered was met with a perfect riposte, his strength nullified by Dooku's impeccable technique. Obi-Wan lunged in to assist, attacking from the flank, but Dooku was unfazed. With a flick of his wrist, he redirected Anakin's saber wide before twisting back and delivering a sharp, precise slash across Obi-Wan's thigh. The Jedi Master stumbled, his leg failing him as he collapsed onto the cold floor. "Your skills are impressive," Dooku mused, "but not enough." Anakin roared and swung wildly, channeling all his anger into his strikes. Dooku merely smirked, his experience making a mockery of the younger warrior's aggression. Then, with one elegant maneuver, he cut deep into Anakin's shoulder, causing the Padawan to drop his lightsaber. Anakin fell to his knees, gripping his wound. Obi-Wan, barely able to move, could only watch as Dooku extended his blade towards Anakin's throat. "No!" Obi-Wan shouted, forcing himself to rise. He charged forward despite the pain, but Dooku anticipated it. He pivoted with a single merciless stroke, impaled Kenobi through the chest. The Jedi Master gasped, his blue eyes widening in shock before the light faded from him entirely. His body fell lifelessly to the ground. Anakin let out a primal scream, reaching out with the Force in a final attempt to avenge his fallen master. He pulled his lightsaber to him and lunged, but Dooku was faster. The Sith Lord sidestepped, and with an almost effortless motion, sliced diagonally across Anakin's torso. The Padawan froze, his face contorted in agony before he collapsed next to Obi-Wan. His last breath left him in a shuddering exhale. Count Dooku exhaled deeply, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Two of the Jedi's greatest warriors had been struck down. The war had already begun, and now the Republic's future had been irrevocably altered. A familiar presence loomed at the entrance of the hangar. Dooku turned to see Grand Master Yoda standing before him, his face contorted with grief as he beheld the bodies of Anakin and Obi-Wan. "Ended, their journey has," Yoda murmured, kneeling beside them, his fingers trembling as he reached out through the Force to sense even the faintest life within them. Dooku did not waste time. With a nod of respect to his former master, he turned and leapt into his solar sailor. The engines roared to life, and before Yoda could stop him, the Sith Lord vanished into the night sky. The Grand Master of the Jedi Order remained frozen in place, grief clouding his thoughts. A dark future had begun. The sleek solar sailor glided through the depths of hyperspace, en route to Coruscant. Count Dooku stood in meditation, his hands clasped behind his back. The deaths of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker had shaken the Force itself. He could feel its ripples reverberating through the galaxy. When he finally arrived at the Works District, where his master awaited him, he found Darth Sidious gazing out at the skyline, his expression unreadable beneath the hood of his dark robes. "You have done well, Lord Tyrannus," Sidious said slowly, but there was no joy in his voice. "And yet, you have done poorly." Dooku narrowed his eyes. "I have removed two of the Republic's greatest champions, Master. The Jedi are now leaderless." Sidious turned, his yellow eyes glowing. "You assume too much, my apprentice. Kenobi was inconsequential, but Skywalker," his voice dropped. "Skywalker was the key to everything." Dooku frowned. He was reckless, predictable. His emotions were his weakness. "His emotions," Sidious countered, stepping forward, "were his strength. I had foreseen his fall to the dark side, his rise as my true apprentice." Dooku's expression remained calm, but internally, a cold realization settled over him. Had his master truly intended to replace him? Was he only ever considered a stepping stone to a greater Sith? "Your actions have forced my hand," Sidious continued. "Without Skywalker, the Clone Wars will now end swiftly. We shall accelerate our timetable." Dooku nodded slowly, understanding what this meant. Order 66, sooner than anticipated. The war would be a storm of blood and fire, sweeping away the Jedi Order in a single decisive stroke. For the first time, Dooku questioned if he had truly secured his place at his master's side, or if he had simply delayed the inevitable. With Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi dead, the Clone Wars took a drastically different turn. Their leadership would have been instrumental in the Republic's greatest victories, but without them, the Jedi floundered. Across the Outer Rim, Separatist forces surged forward, led by General Grievous and a host of tactical masterminds. Core worlds, once thought untouchable, now stood under siege. The Republic's war effort, already stretched thin, collapsed under the unrelenting assault. Within a year, the Republic had been pushed back to Coruscant and a few core worlds. The once mighty Grand Army of the Republic, without its greatest warriors, had lost battle after battle. The war was already lost. Darth Sidious gave the final order. The Jedi were not prepared. The Grand Army of the Republic turned against their former commanders overnight. The clones, once loyal to the Jedi, gunned them down in cold efficiency. The few Jedi who survived fled into the shadows, scattered and leaderless. Coruscant itself became a battlefield. The Jedi Temple still standing defiantly, prepared for its final stand. And at the head of the assault, clad in dark robes, stood Count Dooku. The darkened skies of Coruscant were illuminated by fire and destruction as Separatist warships descended upon the core. The Republic was in its death throes, and the Jedi, trapped within their own temple, were about to face their reckoning. Count Dooku strode through the main entrance of the Jedi Temple, his curved hilt igniting with a blood-red glow. Behind him, waves of clone troopers and Separatist droids flooded inside, their weapons primed to massacre the defenders. Jedi of all ranks, knights, Padawans, and even masters stood ready to resist. Blades of blue and green ignited in defiance, clashing against a mechanical tide. The temple halls, once a place of serenity, became a battleground of screams, blaster fire, and clashing sabers. Dooku was an unstoppable force. The former Jedi Master weaved through the battle, his form precision unmatched. Every strike was calculated, every movement efficient. He dispatched Jedi with ease, their defences crumbling before his elegant but deadly blade work. Masters tried to rally the remaining defenders, but Dooku knew their weaknesses. He exploited their emotions, taunted them with their impending doom. One by one, the pillars of the Order fell. In the High Council chamber, the last of the Jedi Masters stood. Shaak Ti, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, and Saesee Tiin stood in defiance as Dooku entered. He observed them with quiet amusement. "You always believed the Republic could be saved," he said coldly. "But the Republic is a corpse, and the Jedi Order will soon join it." Kit Fisto lunged first, his blade a green blur, but Dooku sidestepped and struck with brutal efficiency, his saber carving through the Nautilan's chest. Fisto collapsed, gasping in pain as his weapon clattered to the floor. Shaak Ti and Saesee Tiin attacked in unison, their sabers moving in harmony. But Dooku's mastery of Makashi allowed him to effortlessly evade their strikes. With a flick of his wrist, he severed Teen's hand before plunging his blade into the Iktoshi's heart. Shaak Ti let out a cry of anguish, but Dooku was merciless. With a sweep of his hand, he unleashed a torrent of Sith lightning, sending her crumpling to the floor in agony. Only Plo Koon remained. The Kel Dor Jedi ignited his saber, his breathing mask amplifying the rhythmic sound of his controlled inhalations. "I will not allow this darkness to consume the galaxy," Plo Koon declared. Dooku merely smirked. "It already has." Their duel was brief but intense. Plo Koon's mastery of Gemso allowed him to hold his ground against Dooku's relentless assault, but the Sith Lord's precision and experience proved too much. In a final stroke, Dooku severed the Jedi Master's saber arm, and with a flick of his wrist, decapitated him. The Jedi Council was no more. But Dooku's triumph was short-lived. A furious gust of wind erupted behind him as the doors to the chamber were blasted open. Mace Windu stood at the entrance, his amethyst blade humming with lethal intensity. Behind him, a group of surviving Jedi entered, their expressions hardened with grief and rage. Dooku turned, his expression unreadable. "Ah, Master Windu, I was beginning to think you'd fled." Windu's eyes burned with righteous fury. "You killed them all!" "They were weak," Dooku replied with a smirk. "And you will join them soon enough." Windu wasted no more time with words. He lunged, his mastery of Vapad turning him into a blur of motion. Dooku met his assault, but he had underestimated the raw power of Windu's form. Every strike from the Jedi Master was relentless, overwhelming, pressing Dooku onto the defensive for the first time. Blow after blow, Windu's amethyst blade cut through Dooku's defenses. The Sith Lord attempted to use the Force to drive Windu back, but the Jedi Master absorbed the darkness, turning it back against Dooku. With a final devastating strike, Windu's blade cut through Dooku's shoulder, severing his sword arm. The Sith Lord gasped, falling to his knees, his weapon tumbling to the ground. The great Count Dooku, once the pride of the Jedi Order, had been bested. Windu raised his blade for the killing strike, but before he could deliver it, a wave of dark energy filled the room. Darth Sidious had arrived. From the shadows, Yoda emerged, his green saber igniting. His ears drooped with sorrow as he gazed upon the devastation. "Ends today, the Sith's treachery does," Yoda declared. Sidious cackled. "Does it?" A duel unlike any other erupted. The Force itself trembled as Yoda and Sidious clashed in a whirlwind of light and shadow. Lightning cracked against the walls. The floor of the council chamber shattered beneath them as the two titans of the Force fought with everything they had. Windu, weakened from his battle with Dooku, attempted to assist, but Sidious unleashed a powerful blast of energy, sending him flying into the rubble. Dooku, bleeding and barely conscious, watched as his former master and old mentor battled for the fate of the galaxy. But the dark side had grown too strong. Sidious unleashed a final, devastating storm of light. Yoda struggled against it, his small form pushed to its limits. With one last effort, he redirected the energy back towards Sidious, sending the Dark Lord staggering. And then, Mace Windu struck. With a powerful swing, Windu's amethyst blade severed Sidious's head from his body. The Sith Lord's corpse collapsed. His reign of terror ended. As the echoes of battle faded, Windu and Yoda turned toward Dooku, who lay, bleeding out, slumped against the wall. "You have lost," Windu said coldly. But Dooku, even in death, let out a quiet chuckle. "Have I?" For though Sidious was dead, the Separatist fleet still hung in the skies above Coruscant. Across the galaxy, the Confederacy of Independent Systems still believed in their cause. And with no Sith Lord to control them, the war did not end. Instead, it escalated. The Republic, broken and leaderless, crumbled within weeks. The Separatists, now led by the charismatic Mina Bonteri, took control of Coruscant. A new era had begun. The Jedi had survived the Sith, but they had failed to save the Republic. The war had been won, just not by them. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week for Fan Friday. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.